My cousins thought I'd disappeared after they stole everything from me. They were wrong. This is family betrayal at its worst, and revenge and justice at its most satisfying. For years, my cousins toasted to my poverty with champagne bought by my grandfather's stolen money, thinking I had disappeared into the shadows forever. But as I walked into the boardroom today, the color drained from their faces because the poor girl they mocked is now the only one who can save them from ruin. My name is Ava Gonzalez, and that moment of silence, the way the heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me, trapping the oxygen in the room, was worth every single second of the hell I endured for the last 7 years. I didn't say a word at first. I just walked to the head of the table, the massive mahogany expanse that has hosted senators, oil tycoons, and old money royalty for a century. I placed my leather portfolio on the surface, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. I looked at them, really looked at them. Ricardo, who used to wear Italian suits that cost more than my first car, was sweating through a shirt that looked like it had been pressed one too many times. Isabella, the queen bee who once laughed while security escorted me off my grandfather's property, was gripping her pearls so tightly her knuckles were white. And Elena, the quiet follower who watched the betrayal happen and did nothing, wouldn't even meet my eyes. They didn't know I was the buyer. They didn't know who the new chairperson of the Obsidian Club was until I walked through that door. They were expecting a savior. They were expecting a bailout. Instead, they got Ava Gonzalez. To understand why the air in that room felt so toxic, you have to understand where we started. My grandfather, Mateo Gonzalez, was a titan. He started with a single grocery store and built a distribution empire that spanned 3 continents. He was a hard man, but he was fair, and he loved me. I was the only one in the family who actually cared about the logistics, the supply chains, the workers. While my cousins were summering in Ibiza and buying their way into universities, I was in the warehouses with Abuelo, learning how to drive a forklift and read a balance sheet. We had a plan. It was always understood, though rarely spoken aloud in front of the others, that I was the successor. My father had passed away when I was young, and Abuelo Mateo became my father figure. He told me, specifically, that he wanted the legacy to go to the one person who knew how to build it, not just spend it. But Abuelo got sick. It wasn't sudden, it was a slow, agonizing slide into dementia. It started with forgetting names, then forgetting where he was. In the last 6 months of his life, he was bedridden, his mind a fog of confusion. I was there every day, feeding him, reading to him, holding his hand. My cousins, Ricardo, Isabella, and Elena, they visited once a month, usually to ask for an advance on their trust funds or to have him sign checks they claimed were for medical expenses. When Abuelo finally passed, I was devastated. I lost my anchor, but I thought I still had my family. I thought we would grieve together. I was naive. I was so incredibly stupid. The day of the will reading was the day my life ended, or at least the first version of it. We gathered in the lawyer's office. I sat apart from them, my eyes swollen from crying. They looked impatient, checking their watches. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, who I had never trusted, cleared his throat. He produced a document. It wasn't the will Abuelo had shown me 2 years prior. It was a new one, dated 3 weeks before his death. 3 weeks before he died, when he didn't even know his own name. The terms were brutal. The entire estate, the company, the properties, the investments, the liquid cash, was divided equally among Ricardo, Isabella, and Elena. And for Ava Gonzalez, the will read, and I will never forget these words, "To my granddaughter Ava, I leave nothing, as her behavior in my final years caused me great distress." I stood up, shaking. I screamed that it was a lie. I screamed that they had manipulated him, that he wasn't of sound mind. I looked at Mr. Sterling, demanding to know how he could verify a signature from a man who couldn't even hold a pen. Ricardo stood up then. He walked over to me, looking sad, a performance for the lawyer. He put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Ava, stop. We know you tried to pressure him into cutting us out. He told us in his lucid moments. He knew what you were doing. Just go." I tried to fight it. I spent the little savings I had on a lawyer, but they had the Gonzalez fortune behind them. They buried me in legal fees. They froze the accounts. They painted a narrative in the press that I was the greedy, manipulative granddaughter who tried to take advantage of a dying man. They destroyed my reputation before I could even defend it. Within 4 months, I was bankrupt. I lost my apartment. I sold my car. The final blow came when I went to the family estate to retrieve a box of my father's photos I had left in the attic. Isabella met me at the gate with 2 private security guards. She laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound that haunted my nightmares for years. She said, "The trash doesn't belong in the palace, Ava. We burned those boxes last week. We're redecorating." She tossed a $100 bill through the gate bars. It fluttered and landed in the mud near my shoe. "For a taxi," she said. "Go away, Ava. You don't exist to us anymore." I walked 5 miles in the rain that day. I didn't take the money. That was the bottom. I spent the next year surviving. I worked double shifts as a waitress in a diner on the edge of the city. I lived in a studio apartment that smelled of mold and stale cigarettes. I ate ramen noodles and walked to work because I couldn't afford the bus fare. But while I was scrubbing tables, I was watching. I read the business sections of the newspapers customers left behind. I saw the decline of the Gonzalez empire. Without Abuelo and without me, my cousins had no idea how to run the business. They sold off the logistics division, the heart of the company, to a competitor for quick cash. They sold the real estate assets to fund their lavish lifestyles. They were stripping the carcass of the legacy I was supposed to protect. It fueled a fire in my belly that was hotter than any rage I had ever felt. I stopped crying and started planning. I knew the logistics industry. I knew where the gaps were. I knew the clients my grandfather had served for decades were unhappy with the new management. I started a consulting firm from my kitchen table. I called it Phoenix Logistics. At first, it was just me, a laptop, and a prepaid phone. I reached out to old contacts, mid-level managers who had been pushed out by my cousins. I offered them solutions to supply chain problems I knew existed because I knew how the old systems failed. I worked 20 hours a day. I didn't date. I didn't take vacations. I didn't sleep. Every dollar I made went back into the business. My break came 2 years later. A massive shipping conglomerate was looking to optimize their South American routes. I knew those routes better than anyone. I pitched them a strategy that saved them $40 million in the first year. That contract made me a millionaire. But I didn't stop. I invested in tech startups. I bought distressed real estate. I diversified. I built a portfolio that was lean, aggressive, and modern. While my cousins were bleeding cash trying to maintain an old world image, I was building a new world. By year 5, I was back in the same circles, but I kept a low profile. I used a holding company for my purchases. I changed my hair, my style. I stayed out of the tabloids. I was a ghost in the machine of the city's elite. I watched my cousins from afar. Their fall was slow, then fast. The money from the asset sales ran out. They had leveraged their properties to the hilt. They were living on credit, moving money from one account to another to cover the minimum payments. The only thing keeping them afloat was their status. In our city, status is currency. As long as they were members of the Obsidian Club, they were untouchable. The club was the gatekeeper. Deals were made in the cigar lounge. Loans were approved on the golf course with a handshake. Membership signaled that you were good for it. If you were kicked out of the Obsidian, you were socially and financially dead. Banks would call in loans. Creditors would circle like sharks. 6 months ago, I heard a whisper. The Obsidian Club was in trouble. The old ownership group wanted out. They had mismanaged the pension fund and needed a quiet exit. They were looking for a buyer who could take on the liability and inject capital, but they wanted it kept secret until the deal was done to prevent a panic among the members. I bought it. I bought the whole thing. The building, the land, the debts, and the membership charter. I spent the last month going through the member files. It was fascinating reading. And there, at the top of the delinquent list, were the Gonzalez cousins. They hadn't paid their dues in 2 years. They had racked up massive tabs at the bar and the restaurant. They had taken personal loans from the club's emergency fund, a privilege reserved for members in good standing, and never paid them back. According to the bylaws, the chairperson has the sole discretion to expel members for non-payment, but more importantly, the chairperson has the right to accelerate the debt collection. That brings us back to the boardroom. I sat in the high-backed leather chair, the leather creaking as I leaned forward. I let the silence stretch for another 10 seconds. "Hello, family," I said softly. Ricardo tried to speak first. He cleared his throat, his voice cracking. "Ava? We heard the club was sold. We had no idea. That I had $500 million in liquid assets to buy it?" I finished for him. "No, I suppose you wouldn't. The last time you saw me, you threw a $100 bill in the mud." Isabella flinched as if I'd slapped her. "Ava, look," she started, her voice trembling. "What happened back then? It was complicated. We were grieving. We made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I repeated, tasting the word. "Forging a will is a mistake. Bribing a lawyer is a mistake. Throwing your grandfather's favorite person onto the street is a mistake." "We didn't forge it," Elena blurted out, then immediately covered her mouth. I opened the portfolio. Inside were 3 files. I slid them across the table. They stopped in front of each of them. "Open them," I commanded. They opened the folders. Inside were detailed breakdowns of their financial lives. I had forensic accountants dig through everything. I knew about Ricardo's gambling debts in Macau. I knew about Isabella's failed fashion line that was really a money laundering scheme for her boyfriend. I knew about Elena's second mortgage that was 3 months behind. "You are all insolvent," I said calmly. "You are living on fumes. The only reason the banks haven't foreclosed on your homes is because you are members of this club. The bank assumes that if you are here, you have access to capital. This membership is the only thing standing between you and the street." Ricardo slammed his hand on the table, trying to summon the ghost of his old arrogance. "You can't kick us out. Our grandfather was a founding member. The Gonzalez name is on the plaque in the lobby." "The Gonzalez name," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "is currently synonymous with failure because of you 3. You destroyed his company. You sold his legacy, and now you are leeching off the last place that holds his memory." I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out over the city skyline. "I own this club now, and under Article 14 of the bylaws, which I'm sure you haven't read, any member with outstanding debts to the club in excess of $50,000 can be immediately expelled and sued for the balance." I turned back to them. "Ricardo, you owe the club $120,000. Isabella, $80,000. Elena, $45,000. But you co-signed Ricardo's latest bridge loan, so you're on the hook for his too." "Ava, please," Isabella was crying now. Real tears this time. "If you kick us out, the Bank of Commerce calls the loan on my house tomorrow. I have nowhere to go. I have 2 kids." "I had nowhere to go," I reminded her. "I didn't have kids, thankfully, but I was 22 years old and alone. Do you remember what you told me? The trash doesn't belong in the palace?" "We are family," Ricardo shouted. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It meant everything to me," I shouted back, finally letting the anger crack through my composed mask. "It meant everything. I would have run the company and made sure you all were taken care of. I would have grown the fortune for all of us, but you got greedy. You wanted the golden goose, so you cut its throat, and now you're surprised you're starving." The room went deadly silent again. "However," I said, smoothing my skirt and sitting back down, "I am not you. I don't get off on cruelty. I am a businesswoman, and right now you 3 are a bad investment, but I see an opportunity for restructuring." They looked up, a glimmer of hope in their eyes. "I won't expel you. Not today," I said. They audibly exhaled. Ricardo slumped in his chair. "Thank you, Ava. Thank you. We can work this out. We can—" "I'm not finished," I cut him off. "I won't expel you, but you will work off your debt." "Work it off?" Isabella asked, confused.
Like a payment plan? No, I smiled, a cold, sharp smile. The club is undergoing a massive renovation. We are short-staffed in the service department. We need waitstaff, we need cleaning crews, we need groundskeepers.
Ricardo's face went purple. You cannot be serious. You expect me to mow the lawn? I expect you to pay what you owe, I said. You have no cash, you have no credit, you have labor. I calculated your hourly rates based on the current market. If you work full-time shifts, Ricardo, you can clear your debt to the club in about 3 years. Isabella, 2 years. Alina, maybe 18 months. This is humiliation, Isabella shrieked. Serving drinks to our friends? Scrubbing toilets in the locker room? We are Gonzalez's. And I am the chairperson, I said, closing my portfolio. Here is the deal. You accept the positions, you work, you pay off the debt, you keep your membership status active, which keeps the banks off your back. You get to keep your houses and your fake lives as long as you spend 40 hours a week wearing the club uniform. I leaned in close. Or I expel you right now, I release a press statement detailing exactly why, I sue you for the debt, forcing you into personal bankruptcy, you lose the houses, the cars, the status. You end up exactly where you put me 7 years ago. I checked my watch. You have 5 minutes to decide. The uniform fitting is downstairs in the basement. I watched them crumble. I watched the realization wash over them that they were trapped. They looked at each other, desperate for another way out, but there wasn't one. I had bought the floor they stood on. Elena was the first to break. "I'll do it," she whispered. "I can't lose my house. My husband will leave me." Isabella glared at her, then looked at me with pure hatred. "I hate you, Ava." "The feeling is entirely mutual," I replied cheerfully, "but at least I'm paying you minimum wage. That's more than you gave me." Ricardo didn't say anything. He just stared at the table, defeated. "Excellent," I said, standing up. "Report to the manager, Mr. Henderson. He knows who you are. He's been instructed to treat you like any other employee on probation. No special treatment. If you're late, you're fired. If you're rude to a guest, you're fired. And if you're fired, the deal is off and I ruin you." I walked toward the door. As I reached for the handle, I turned back one last time. "Oh, and Ricardo?" He looked up, his eyes hollow. "Next week, the club is hosting the Global Logistics Summit. I'll be the keynote speaker. Make sure the champagne is chilled. I'd hate to send it back." I walked out of the boardroom and down the grand hallway lined with portraits of the city's founders. I stopped in front of the portrait of Abuelo Mateo. For years, I couldn't look at photos of him without crying, without feeling the sting of how he was used in his final days. But today, I looked at his painted eyes and I felt peace. I had taken back the name. I had secured the legacy, and I had taught my cousins the one lesson he'd tried to teach us all those years ago. You don't get to eat at the table unless you're willing to cook the meal. I walked out of the club and into the bright afternoon sun. My driver opened the door to my car. I got in, pulled out my phone, and called my lawyer. "It's done," I said. "They took the deal." "Are you sure you want to keep them around, Ava?" he asked. "It seems risky." "It's not risky," I said, watching the front doors of the club through the tinted window. "It's justice. Besides, I need someone to polish the brass. It's starting to look a little tarnished." This morning, I arrived at the club for breakfast. Isabella was there, wearing the black vest and white shirt of the serving staff. She was pouring coffee for a man who used to try and date her. She saw me, and her hand shook, spilling a few drops on the tablecloth. She looked terrified. I sat at my usual table, the chairperson's table. She approached, eyes downcast. "Coffee, Miss Gonzalez?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I looked at her. I saw the bags under her eyes. I saw the chipped nail polish. I saw the humility that had been forced upon her.
Yes, thank you, Isabella, I said. She poured it. Is there anything else? She asked. I took a sip. It was perfect. No, I said. That will be all. Keep the change. I placed a single $100 bill on the table. She looked at it, then at me. A flash of memory passed between us. The rain, the mud, the gate. She picked up the bill, her fingers trembling, and put it in her apron pocket. Thank you, she choked out and hurried away to the kitchen. They say success is the best revenge. They're wrong. Owning the people who tried to destroy you, that is a level of satisfaction that success alone can't touch. They wanted to live in the Obsidian Club forever. Now they will. They'll just be using the servants' entrance. And me? I'm just getting started. The Gonzalez Empire is back, and this time there are no leaks in the ship. Just me at the helm and a very motivated crew scrubbing the decks. My grandfather built a dynasty. My cousins built a debt. I'm just here to collect. If this story made you feel that quiet sense of justice, you're in the right place. Like the video, subscribe, and stay with this channel for more revenge stories where betrayal finally gets answered.